May 1944. A freight train slowly enters the new inner spur laid directly into Auschwitz II-Birkenau, so unloading proceeds without delays. Floodlights draw even strips of light over the tracks. Brake shoes scrape metal, and the wheels, with the crunch of stone grit, come up to the very edge of the platform. The air holds the persistent smell of coal dust, damp soil and wet wood. Door bolts are slid back one after another. The leaves swing open, and people are led out of the darkness of the cars onto the grey gravel, forming long ranks at the edge of the deck. Belongings are taken separately. Suitcases, bundles and sacks are stacked in separate piles, and immediately carried along laid planks toward the sorting barracks, so they no longer impede the movement of the columns. The war continues on all fronts. Germany is fighting the Allies, and at the same time putting into action the plan for the final solution to the Jewish question, adopted in Berlin on January 20th, 1942. In the spring and summer of 1944, large transports of deportees arrive from Hungary. The flow is so dense that the railroad is brought directly onto the campgrounds, eliminating the earlier herding of columns through the town. On site, coordination is led by former Commandant Rudolf Höss. In documents, this appears as the Höss operation. Movement schedules are fitted to the operations on the ramp. As soon as the shunting engine pulls the empty cars onto a siding, the next train is already ready to be brought in, so that not a single gap appears between trains. Inside the unloaded cars remain scraps of bread, empty bottles, children's odds and ends. The bunk boards ring with a metallic echo when jolted. Families instinctively stay together, but this lasts only for the first few dozen steps. The guards even out the ranks, turn people toward the light, and direct them along the platform toward the entrance to the sector. Baggage is finally separated from the flow of people. Handcarts with belongings go off along their own planks to the warehouses, and no longer cross the pedestrian routes. As soon as a car is empty, the door is shut and the shunter immediately hauls the empties to the layover track. And before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel, and if you're enjoying this one, don't forget to subscribe and smash a like. The track layout is built as a loop, so the new train is received without crossing movements. The switches are fixed to eliminate reverse moves and unnecessary shunting. Light masts stand at equal intervals. Because of this, there are no deep shadows on faces, and everything happening on the apron is equally clear. The wooden ramps are designed for heavy freight carts, yet their width and placement are sufficient for the pedestrian columns to pass alongside without delays. From above, the plan reads without explanation. People move along one line, property along another, and their routes are separated so they never intersect. Along the edge of the apron, a medical team stands by with stretchers and rough cloth. They're called if someone falls or faints. Ahead, the corridor narrows, and under the lamps, in full view of the entire column, stand SS doctors and security personnel. Among the arriving doctors is Josef Mengele. He walks along the ranks, assesses age, posture, gait, and prepares for the first examination. No conversations are held here. Orders are given briefly and clearly, and the column, almost without stopping, moves toward the marked passage. To the left of the ramp rises a brick complex with a tall chimney and wide gravel approaches. To the right stretch the bath disinfection and registration barracks. Next to them, service buildings and a gate deeper into the sector. The approaches are made deliberately wide. There are no bottlenecks at the turns. The ranks do not break into clumps and do not get stuck. The train remains at the platform only for the time of unloading, then departs, and its place is taken by the next group of people, lit by the same lamps and guided along the same trajectories. Before the inner spur existed, unloading took place at the so-called Old Jewish ramp at the Auschwitz station, and columns were driven through the town, which consumed precious time and required separate security on the roads. The Hungarian transports of 1944 forced a maximum consolidation of all links into a single node. Train, ramp and selection corridor were brought together in one field of view, so the rhythm would not break and the route would repeat without unnecessary pauses. Papers, letters and certificates that people hold in their hands decide nothing here. On this apron a different language operates. The language of distances between people, the gestures of the escorts, and the directions of the light. Documents will appear later for those who are led to registration, but on the ramp it matters more where exactly the lamp stands, at what angle the column will turn, and how quickly the interval between shoulders in the rank will even out. From the first loosened bolt to the formed column only a few minutes pass. On duty they measure this by the watch. The sound of couplers, short whistles of the shunter and distant clicks of switches roll to the far edge, where the column is already approaching the entrance. Wet gravel softens underfoot, leaving a dense mesh of tracks. The width of the path shows how many people walk in each row. Working lights are chosen so that signals can be read even from the middle of the rank. And as soon as the first four step under the lamps of the narrow passage, on the neighbouring track the switch is already being thrown, bringing in the next train. At the car doors stand guards who ensure that no one returns to their belongings. The carts with property go straight to the gates of the warehouse zone. There, books, tags, inventories and locks begin their work. And this process no longer intersects with what happens on the gravel. On the ramp itself remain the people and the stone grit underfoot. The system holds because the lines of movement are separated and do not interfere with one another. At the signal post, the duty driver receives short light instructions. The track is clear, curve radii are calculated in advance, crossing movements are forbidden by the plan. For each train, the same sequential order of actions is repeated, and the shift knows in advance which operation will come next. Whatever the front reports may say, here time is counted differently. By the minutes it takes the flow to get from the first opened bolt to the turn of the column into the selection corridor. The inner spur, the bright and even light, and the direct passage are bound into one continuous cycle, with no place left for a random stop. The selection corridor begins right behind the row of lamps. It is here that SS doctors conduct the visual selection introduced in the summer of 1942, and by 1944 turned into a fast, pause-free procedure. Those who appear fit for labour are directed to the left, to the baths, sanitary processing and registration. The elderly, children, the sick and the weakened are sent to the right, so that the narrow section at the entrances does not clog with delays and does not form jams. Josef Mengele, facing the column, studies posture, age and gait, and with a single movement of the hand determines where a person will go. Intervals between shoulders are kept even. Stops are suppressed on the spot so the overall flow does not lose speed. The logic of the setup is visible without explanations. The passage is marked for movement in two ranks that do not jam at the turns and proceed at the same pace. In the summer of 1944, the share of those turned to the right is large. Many trains are made up of women, children and the elderly, so the right-hand line is longer in distance but is wound through faster so that the entrance does not become a narrow neck. The left-hand line is visually shorter, but it's followed by an entire sequence of procedures: shower, haircut, processing, registration, assignment to barracks and work details. And all this takes much more time than the short passage through the corridor. The separation of directions begins already on the gravel at the ramp, and thereafter these flows do not mix. The first turn under the lamps decides each person's further fate. Those who are led to the left face sanitary processing, issuance of camp clothing, assignment of a number, and a place on a bunk in one of the barracks. Those who are directed toward the brick buildings with the tall chimney are led through the undressing rooms, and they disappear from the general column, going along a route that does not return to the apron. On the ramp remain the footsteps, the light, and the rhythm of operations that are already preparing the next group of arrivals for the very same sequence of movements. People have already passed the fork at the ramp and are entering the bath disinfection block. They are placed by the walls, where metal grates and wooden benches run along. At the guard's direction, each person in turn removes clothing and neatly lays belongings on the grates by the wall, so the passage is not blocked and no one has to step over other people's bundles. Then comes the mandatory sequence of procedures. First a hot shower, then treatment with solutions against parasites, after which hair is cut with a machine. The duty orderly carefully examines the skin, abrasions and blisters. Those needing bandaging are marked with chalk or a short note so they can be treated separately without delaying the overall flow. Old clothes go straight to sorting, and on the table stacks of camp shirts, trousers and jackets are already laid out. The needed size is issued quickly and without unnecessary talk. Identification is fixed by a number. On the forearm, a row of digits is applied with a needle through a stencil, corresponding to the entry in the arrival book. In the card opposite this number, they immediately indicate the barrack, sector and the intended labour detail, so that in the morning the person is not searched for across the entire yard. The clerk writes the digits evenly and legibly, since this number will be used at the work gates and at the evening roll call. The card is handed to the barrack elder. The person himself memorises the row and the place on the bunk so that no bottlenecks form at the entrance and no one searches for his place in the dark. In the barrack, the elder gives a detailed but time-short explanation so that everyone understands without clarifying questions and shouting across the rows. He shows when réveillé is, where exactly in the mornings numbers are checked at the doors, which route the column takes to the work gates, and where the tool issue point is located. The central aisle is kept clear. This is needed both for the evening round and for the night inspection. Only issued items are allowed on the bunks. Anything extra is taken during the control inspection, so there are no arguments every morning and no minutes lost in the crush. Orderlies monitor the stove and ventilation. They move the damper according to temperature so damp does not accumulate and steam does not choke. At the washstands, they maintain a one-way queue, so people do not crowd in a corner and block the exit. By night the lamps are dimmed, leaving an even strip of light along the aisle, so the round can see the rows without waking the sleepers. The elder separately checks that each cot has a blanket and a pad, and that the boards of the aisle are clean and dry. Work assignment is built on the requests of sites delivered to the office in the evening. Those who can carry heavy materials and walk steadily over sodden ground are sent to construction details. Warehouses take people for sorting, picking and loading. Their accuracy, a steady hand rhythm and attention to detail are important. Factory and repair sites request reinforcements separately when their lines tear. Such lists change more often than the barrack assignments. In the morning the column forms on the yard. At the doors the numbers are checked against the barrack book, after which people are led in formation to the work gates. At the issue point, shovels, wheelbarrows, stretchers and gloves already lie on the tables. Everything is laid out in kits according to pre-made lists, so no one argues at the window and no one swaps tools on the move. The site foreman points with his hands where to carry the first material, where the return path runs, and where to stack empty containers and crates. Work runs in a closed loop. Carry, unload, return along the same path to the issue, take the next load. The medical block admits those whom the elder noted the previous evening and those who in the morning report weakness, high temperature, or wounds that prevent keeping step. The doctor feels the forehead, asks to roll up sleeves, examines the skin, heels and shoe chafing, then quickly decides, temporarily pull from duty or return to the column. If a person is removed from work, his card is moved to a separate folder. The column is not held at the gate. The site foreman immediately receives the new number and requests a replacement from the latest arrivals. Women's groups are more often placed on sorting fabrics, foodstuffs, and small items. There an even tempo and precise finger movements are needed. At each table a daily log is kept. Before closing, the senior checks the final lines and puts the date. Outdoor duties for women are rotated more frequently, so wind and damp do not break the shift in the first hours. They return in the evening through the same gates they left in the morning. Numbers are checked in the same way, so that no one is lost at the passage. The link between barrack and site is maintained by lists. The elder and the site foreman rely on the same number. In the evening, tools returned are necessarily checked against the morning issue so nothing disappears along the way. People are taught to place shovels and wheelbarrows in the same spots on the rack so they do not waste time searching in the morning. Broken handles and damaged wheelbarrows are set aside and entered in the repair log. Before departure, they check footwear, strike the heel and toe so the sole does not float on wet gravel. Wheelbarrow straps are tightened in advance so the handles do not tear free mid-carry. On construction sites, bricks are stacked closer to the wall and mortar closer to the working edge so empty wheelbarrows do not cross paths with full ones. On roadwork, pits are filled and the edge tamped immediately, otherwise the night damp will lift the gravel back up. Lunch is marked by a short signal. Details approach the field kitchen or the mess point for mess tins, forming rows while leaving a clear passage for wheelbarrows. The pause is fixed in time. The elder warns of return a couple of minutes ahead so straps can be tightened in advance, and tools checked before the first run after the break. In the second half of the day, the work area is usually brought back to the morning state. Stacks are pulled closer to the laying point. Boards are sorted by length and set on edge so size is visible at a glance, and the edge of the roadway is carried through to the end so nothing bulges up overnight. By evening, the site storekeeper receives tools back according to the morning sheet and notes what is intact, what needs repair, and what is missing. At the gate, numbers are counted again. Absentees are entered separately with a note to find the reason. The column returns along the same route, forms on the yard, and files by rows to the barrack doors. On the threshold, the elder holds the book at belt height and ensures no one jams the doorway. Inside, belongings are laid in the same orientation on the bunks, so the night round from the aisle centre can see the blanket edges and not climb into the rows. In the medical block, they keep their own separate log. Temperature, breathing, a short note, hold or return, without long explanations. The dressing table is marked off by finger width, so bandage strips are picked faster. Iodine, gauze and tapes lie nearby so the hand does not search the whole room. Labour cards are moved between folders at once, and the site foreman receives the exact number for tomorrow, even before lights out. In the barrack book, a time mark is placed. A thin line totals the day so the morning starts with a clean line. At night the same sounds are heard outside, the creak of warehouse carts, the clicks of locks at the factory yard gates. Inside remain the orderly's steps and the elder's quiet round from post to post. It smells of soap, wet fabric and stove smoke hanging in an even layer under the rafters. The same boots stand under the cots, heels outward for inspection. Blanket edges lie flush with the boards, so the round is not delayed at each bed. Those who at the fork were directed to the right are led to the brick buildings with the tall chimney, to the gas chambers and crematoria, where Zyklon B based on hydrogen cyanide is used. At the entrance, people are undressed and told that showers are ahead. Valuables are requested to be placed separately. After the group is inside, the doors are sealed tightly for the set time. Then another cycle begins, hidden from outside eyes. Bodies are carried out and brought to the furnaces, which are kept at operating temperature so as not to waste time and fuel on heating each time anew. Smoke rises in an even plume toward the fields beyond the camp. External train delays no longer affect this. In parallel with the human flow, but not intersecting with it, the property line moves. On the other side of the platform, carts with suitcases and bundles go along planks into the warehouse zone known in the camp as Kanada. Their clothing, footwear and metals are laid out by sections, and each intake is marked with the date and the train number. Documents and photographs from pockets are placed in separate boxes. Valuables are sealed and carried into a guarded room. This line runs on its own and does not return to the gravel of the ramp. The group's route to the crematoria leads beyond the ramp to paired buildings, which in camp routine were designated 2 to 3 and 4 to 5. In one complex, the undressing rooms and chamber were below ground level. Stairs led down and vanished from sight. In the other, everything was at yard level, with doors directly into the enclosed section. At the entrances there are rows of benches, so clothing lies flat and the passage is not blocked. On the tables are baskets and forms, with a pencil tied to a leg so marks are not lost. The sentry records the moment when the chamber door is hermetically closed. The log records the exact time and the number admitted. Ventilation after exposure is carried out according to a table indicating the room volume and weather corrections. The duty man at the control panel keeps a finger on the needed column, checks movement by the arrows, and watches the narrow strip of paper at the observation slit. Its flutter shows the draft. When airing is complete, the crew in protective masks enters and works along the same route, so tools always return to their hooks in the order they are used. The corridor to the furnaces is tiled. Wooden tracks are laid on the floor for cartwheels so the tiles do not crumble. Charging openings go in a row. The foreman speaks briefly and distinctly, because warm air pulls at the furnaces and the draft is noisy. Fuel is stored in sections by the wall. Each furnace has its own coal cart so temperature does not fall through, and manoeuvring does not pull people off their work. Breakdowns are entered on a separate line in the book, and a tag is hung immediately on the loop or valve so the repair crew sees the spot without verbal explanations. Ash and unburned remains go to a crusher in a separate room with exhaust. The bunker under the receiving chute is cleaned on schedule even if it is not full to the top, otherwise the rhythm is thrown off. All containers receive a mark of batch and hour, after which they are taken out along an internal route that does not meet the feed to the furnaces head-on. People assigned to this work are placed on a shift schedule. The guard notes the handover of the post with a key and a line in the journal. Hooks hang on the wall by the threshold. Hooks, poles, stretchers, brooms, each item in its place. The order on the board repeats the order of action so the hand reaches without searching. Separate categories of recoverable items follow their own records. Hair is dried in warm rooms and signed by weight on sacks. Metal inclusions and dental prostheses are collected in boxes, sealed, and dispatched with a receipt matching the line in the journal. No operation is considered complete without a written entry. The absence of a line breaks the entire route. In parallel with all this, the property is handled in other rooms. The tables are long enough to open a suitcase fully. Clothing is sorted by fabric and condition. Footwear is cleaned, tied in pairs, and set by size with the numbers facing the aisle. Buttons, buckles, and fittings are removed and placed in separate containers. Paper from pockets is smoothed and laid out by batches. The warehouse ledger does not intersect with other journals. By it, any bale can be found by date and train number, without unpacking the crates again. Undressing rooms admit the next group only with permission from the ventilation post. When by the table, the airing time has passed and the control panel arrows stand as required. If the door hinges tight or the observation window seats poorly, a request is written out and repair is called. The door is not forced shut. Broken hardware will stop several rooms at once. Furnace temperatures are kept without dips, otherwise the queue will creep through the corridors. Keys and journals are handed over by inventory, checked, signed, door closed, and only then does the shift leave. At night the schedule does not change. Outside, news does not affect the cycle order. Wind from the fields only forces the damper to be moved so the flame is not blown into the hall. The floor before the furnace doors is swept and washed. The soot must not turn the path into a slippery strip. Tools again hang on their hooks in the order in which they will be taken in the morning. When dawn breaks, the first feed begins exactly at the moment when work columns are already forming on the yard. In the barracks, numbers are checked and cards prepared. In the warehouses, a new date is opened in the ledgers and the first line is entered. The node returns to its habitual speed. Human routes and routes of belongings go by separate roads, divided by walls, doors and books that tie each flow to its own page. Nothing is announced here with long speeches. Each roll is visible by its place, each gesture is clear without prompts. On each table, the change in the height of stacks shows how the work is going. One shift hands to another a key, a journal, and a short line with the time, and the door closes in such a way as to open already for the next entry. The barracks nightlife runs on a schedule that determines the next day's departure for work. The elder walks along the central aisle with a dim lamp in hand, reads the numbers on forearms in the order of the bunks, and immediately makes entries in the book if someone is missing. Number, time, reason if known. Work clothes are ordered to be hung on hooks at the foot of the beds, so the passage stays clear and no one trips over bundles and boots. Wet items are laid on lines near the stove so the fabric dries and steam does not fog the windows. Foot wraps and cloth bandages are hung evenly so they dry flat. Twists make folds, and folds turn into blisters in the morning and knock a person out of the line. Reveille is not moved because of rain or wind. The clock and the order are more important than the weather. Before receiving the ration, everyone is driven to the washstands for a short lice check. Caps are removed, collars turned out, seams felt with fingers. After this, people line up for soup and bread. Distribution goes at a single pace. Bowls move along the table, and chipped ones are exchanged at the window, marked with chalk so there are no disputed swaps. The elder repeats several times the time to leave for the work gates, so the nearest rows pass it on without turning around. The first 5 people step out to the chalk line in the yard. By them the others align step and distance. At the gate stand a guard and a clerk. They read the numbers aloud against the book so any mistake is immediately heard and corrected on the spot. Those assigned to clothing disinfection are sent to a separate room. Their steam barrels and drying cabinets work according to tables of time and temperature, and a strip with the day's cycle marks hangs on the door. It is compared with the clock. Footwear with lifted soles is sent to the minor repair table. Nails, patches and straps lie sorted in boxes. The repairer tags the pair with a short note and pins it to the laces so the owner can take the boots back without confusion. Tool issue is arranged so that each set corresponds to a specific crew. Where the list shows stretchers, straps are attached at once, to a wheelbarrow, wedging chocks, to a shovel, gloves. The site foreman shows the route with his hands once at the first turn, then places a repeater there. His task is to point the same trajectory to each next person, so empty carts do not collide with loaded ones. Construction sites take those who can keep an even step with bricks and pass them along a chain. Mortar is brought to the edge of the wall so the passage is not blocked. On roadwork, the gravel is levelled to a uniform thickness, and the edges are compacted carefully. Otherwise, overnight damp will raise the stones. In warehouses, the evenness of movement is crucial. Tables must work in one rhythm, and carts must come to a single mark without piling up in a corner. If a person holds the pace confidently on broken ground, he is fixed to heavy carries so the whole line does not slow down. If he falls out of rhythm, he is transferred to sorting, clearing passages, and light supply where a single hitch does not disrupt the general flow. Before the first run, they check footwear. Heel and toe are tapped, so the sole does not slide on wet pebbles. Wheelbarrow straps are tightened in advance. Cracked handles are temporarily wrapped with cloth and marked for replacement. Shovels are matched to height so the back does not break at each movement. In the storeroom hangs a tally board. Broken items are turned into it, and the storekeeper notes how much and what needs replacing, so there is no arguing at the table in the morning. At noon a short signal sounds. Crews go to the field kitchen or the mess tin point, form in rows, leaving a free strip for carts. The break is time-limited. A couple of minutes before the end, the elder warns of reassembly, so there is time to tighten straps, adjust gloves, and meet the first run after the pause without fuss. After lunch, the workplaces are usually put in order for the next day. Stacks of materials are pulled closer to the point of use. Boards are sorted by length and set on edge, so size is visible at once. On the road, the last compaction pass runs along the entire edge without gaps so nothing swells overnight. By evening, the storekeeper takes tools back according to the morning sheet and notes the condition of each item, intact for repair or missing. At the gate, numbers are read again. Absentees are written on a separate line with space for the reason. The column returns the same way, forms on the yard and files by rows to the barrack doors. On the threshold, the elder holds the book to see faces and numbers and ensures conversations do not start in the doorway. Inside, belongings are placed uniformly. Bowls on one shelf, blankets even with the edge, shoes with heels outward, so the night round passes without delays. The medical block keeps a separate log for those taken off work. Temperature, breathing, a short note, hold or return, without long comments. Strips for bandages are cut on a board marked one finger. Iodis, bandages and cloth tapes lie nearby. Everything at hand, so nothing is searched for around the room. Labour cards are moved between folders at once, and even before lights out, the site foreman receives the updated number for the next day's lists. In the barrack book, a line with the time is drawn. This is the day's boundary, so the morning starts clean, without corrections over old lines. Night sounds repeat day after day. Outside, the nails creak in the wheels of warehouse carts. Locks click on the gates of the factory yard. Far away, once a night, a switch snaps on the rails. Inside, only the orderly's steps are heard, and the elders quiet round from post to post. The smell of soap, damp fabric and stove smoke hangs under the beams in an even layer. The same boots stand under the bunks. Blanket edges are aligned with the board. Nothing delays the round. Order saves minutes and strength. Morning repeats yesterday's scheme because the gate schedule is tied to the speed of forming columns and the site's requests. The recount is done by rows. The elder calls the number forward, the first row repeats it. The clerk writes the figure in the book and only then gives the order to move. Tool sets are already tied in bundles by crews. They are not reshuffled for someone's preferences. Sorting and retying takes time that cannot be regained later. If an unscheduled loading or a new task suddenly appears, a box pointer and a person are placed at the corner to indicate the turn to the very last cart, so no line will head toward another. Different crews work in the industrial zone. Some run fences along the perimeter of factory areas. They pass steel posts along a chain, raise the grating, step back when riveters approach with clamps and buckets of rivets. Others unload coal. They measure out with shovels by count into the wheelbarrow, then return the empties along the return path so they do not meet the loaded ones. Brick arrives under canvas. Ropes are ripped off with a single sharp motion. This saves seconds. Stacks are turned with the smooth side toward the passage so the height of the row can be gauged at a glance without counting with fingers. On liquefied soil, plank bridges are laid, and the person carrying them walks half a step ahead of the heaviest loads. If a wheel bogs down, 2 chocks are placed under the front edge, another under the heel, and only then do they push all together on a count so the cart is not pulled to the side. At the end of the shift, the paths are combed with rakes. By the teeth marks it is visible whether anyone passed after cleaning and left trash at the edge. The rule of a clear passage is repeated twice a day, and for violation one is sent for an hour to the table. In front of neighbours this works better than any explanations. On the women's tables there are fabrics, small items and foodstuffs. Hand movements are evened to a single tempo. A hill of unsorted items does not grow behind because the cart is emptied completely before the clerk makes a mark. At the end of the shift, the total by rows is read aloud, the date is written, piles are aligned, the pencil is broken, the board is wiped. This is a ritual that prevents backlogs from piling up. Women's outdoor work is rotated more often so damp and wind do not knock them out in the first hours. Return follows the same paths. At the gate the guards read the list and the gestures remain the same. The familiar sequence reduces errors. In the evening a short cycle of checks is repeated in the barrack. The elder achieves silence, reads by rows, stops only for what can be explained in one sentence. The stove damper is set by the temperature of the metal edge, not by eye. Under the window the exhaust channel is open just enough for the strip of cloth on the hasp to quiver, but not flap. The night orderly is named. He repeats the route he will walk. The lamp in the aisle narrows to a strip the width of a palm. Silence comes not by order, but by habit of the order on which the next day depends. The first full workday after selection sets the general rhythm from Revieli to lights out. At dawn at the barrack doors the elder holds the formation. The clerk checks numbers against the book and listens as the first row repeats the digits. Thus a mistake immediately rings and returns to where it arose. For those who since selection were transferred from heavy carries to tables, their tool sets were prepared in advance. Each item lies in its labelled place, and the summary board shows the overnight remainder. For those with chafed heels, narrow strips of cloth were cut in the evening and a bottle of iodine placed by the washstand, so bandaging does not slow the line to the exit. The column is formed so routes do not intersect. Construction supply takes the feeders. They pass bricks along a chain and bring mortar to the wall's edge, leaving the path clear. Road crews level gravel in a single layer and compact the edges to a hard line, so overnight damp does not raise the surface. Warehouse tables keep an even hand rhythm. Carts arrive at a single mark and do not stand idle. The site foreman stands at the first bend of the route and repeats the trajectory with a gesture until a permanent pointer is placed at the corner, who all day indicates the turn to each next cart. Food is issued by count and by rows. The cook ladles an equal portion. Bowls are brought to the rim of the cauldron evenly. Chipped ones are exchanged and marked with chalk on the window frame so they can be returned to the storeroom without arguments. If someone trades bread for minor shoe or clothing repairs, he is led to the side of the passage so the swap does not confuse the flow. In the barrack, the space on the shelf by the stove is taken in advance. Wet rags must be hung evenly, without snails, otherwise seams curl, chafe the skin, and knock a person out of the column. Then the elder has to find a replacement, and this is reflected in the book. In the infirmary, Revier, the line is kept out of the main passage. The doctor checks breathing by count, runs a hand over the collarbones and the skin of the back, checks the worn heel and sole, and puts a short note. Temporarily remove, or return. Those removed are led away from the gate. Their cards immediately go to another folder. By evening this number reaches the office, and for tomorrow the missing hands are allocated to tables, chains and carries so no line is thrown off by a shortage. Order is maintained not by shouting but by objects that are always in sight. On the tool racks the outlines of shovels, crowbars and hooks are drawn. By an empty outline it's immediately clear what is missing. The central passage remains clear because any bundle or sack on the path means the offender is sent for an hour to the table. Neighbours in the row see this, and the rule begins to work on its own. Numbers are read at the gate, and upon return the first row repeats aloud, and by this echo the clerk understands exactly where the figure failed to match. By night the habits formed hold the barrack in order without extra words. Shoes stand with heels outward, bowls in a straight line on the shelf, issued items on the bunks lie uniformly, so the round sees everything from the middle of the aisle and does not climb into the rows. The stove is set to slow burn. Under the window a narrow slit is left, about a finger's width, so the air circulates slowly, and the rag tied to the hasp only slightly stirs. The night orderly counts even steps from post to post. Over time, the rhythm of his rounds becomes a familiar sound that wakes no one. On the second day, the picture changes hardly at all. Lists and routes are more important than caprices of weather. The recount is again by rows. The elder dictates the number forward, the first row repeats, the clerk marks it and only then gives the movement. If unscheduled tasks suddenly arrive, in the needed place a box pointer appears and a person showing the new turn to the very last cart. This is cheaper than any confusion and collisions. Risks here are measured by short lines in the journal. The one who regularly falls out of rhythm on carries is transferred to canteen work for a shift. The one who too often trades bread for repairs or trifles appears in the book closer to the infirmary lines. The one who watches his footwear, keeps his tool on its hook, and returns to the gate on time usually passes the day without marks, and in the evening takes his place in his row without shoulder shoving. After the selection, survival is reduced to distances between people, to exact time, and to hundreds of small things that make up the even, non-intersecting route of each day.